Welcome to the Financial Freedom Secrets Show. This is your host, Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, helping business owners create financial freedom faster by mastering the language of money. Want to see how well you're tracking towards financial freedom? Complete our 40-point financial performance scorecard at wealthhealthcheck.com.au. That's wealthhealthcheck.com.au. The average score for most business owners is 18 out of 40. So complete the scorecard now and see how well you're tracking towards financial freedom.
G'day guys, this is Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, and we're here for another episode of Financial Freedom Secrets podcast. I have a good friend of mine, Russell Pearson here, who is an absolute legend. He's a phenomenal speaker. He is an amazing coach and consultant. He works with service-based business owners the world around to really show them a different way to grow and scale that is very contrary to many of the kind of popular guru methodologies that have come about over the course of the last decade. I really resonate with a lot of Russell's stuff. He's an all-round awesome bloke, and I know he's going to be dropping some absolute bombshells here today. So, Russell, thanks for joining us, mate. How you doing?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me, Jackson.
Mate, I must say, whenever I see your background and your studio and your setup, it makes me a little bit jealous. I haven't quite got to that level yet, mate. The lighting, the Vaseline on the old lens, it makes you look fantastic, mate. I just needed to let you know.
I don't know about Vaseline on a lens. I'm starting to get more lines than I used to have. That's for sure.
So, Russell, before we get too stuck into it, mate, tell us a little bit about your story and what got you to where you are, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been doing work in, I guess, the marketing, sales and promotional space for nearly 27 years. So back in the 90s, we used to work with a lot of pharmaceutical companies, a lot of big corporate contracts. I worked in that space for nearly a decade before going out on my own and starting an agency. And built that agency up to a certain size, had a whole team around me, and really moved into the advisory space. And it's interesting. There are a number of different steps along that journey, but I think the key is how things have changed when we're talking about marketing in particular. Back in those 90s, everyone had to be the solution provider for something, right? So if you weren't a solution provider, you had nothing. And everyone would be like, oh, look at the solution that I've provided or created. And so it just started this whole entrepreneurship journey for other people, whether they would spend 2 years creating something without actually finding out if people wanted it. So we moved from that early 90s in the solution space to, let's sell the sizzle, not the sausage. But it's sometimes difficult to sell without actually a sausage to sell. So we moved to features and benefits by about 2010. Everyone was talking about features and benefits and list stacking and value stacking. But the reality is we've actually come a bit full circle. People don't like to buy off, that sort of productization anymore. They're very clear about the fact that there are certain things they don't like in life and there's certain outcomes that they do want. And that's really brought me to a space where marketing and sales have now needed to interlock to be especially if you're an advisor or a consultant, interlock into a way that it's going to engage people in a way that's going to enable you to do great work when you're actually working with someone. And that's all about outcomes.
Yes, makes so much sense, mate. I've got light bulbs going off here. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story here, Russell. You get a kick out of this. So my old man was a financial advisor back in the late 80s, early 90s for A&P, right? And he's since passed away, but I was going through some of his stuff, just having a little bit of a walk down memory lane, and I found some of his sales collateral that he had from A&P from back in the 80s. And, mate, so much of it was so on point for today, all of this value-based selling and outcome-based selling. And it's basically come full circle. Like, this is pre-internet, pre-all of this gimmicky stuff. And I see the contrast today of all of these guys, they were born yesterday. And they haven't even gone through a full economic cycle, and they're preaching to be these kind of marketing gurus. And, mate, you have literally lived and breathed it all through all of these years. And it's interesting. There's no such thing as a new idea, is there?
Well, no, there's certainly a new way to present it, and that's, I think, part of it. Making sure that you're contextually aware of what's going on for the people that you support. It is so key as to how to offer something, and I mean that's key to it all.
And it's interesting here, mate. Like I saw a TikTok yesterday, actually. It was a bit of a kind of a play and a stab at consultants. And there was like two friends that had caught up and they were talking, and the guy's like, hey, what do you actually do? And he was just using all of these buzzwords to talk about his IT consultancy and engaging stakeholders and all of this stuff. No one has any idea what this guy does, right? And it actually applies. I see so many people, particularly in this day and age, there's a lot of competition. And I think people are really struggling to stand out, and they're buying into these buzzwords and all of this bullshit without actually getting clear on what it is that they actually do and what are the problems that they solve. So, mate, in your world, like, how much of that is a problem industry-wide in terms of value proposition and positioning in your experience, Russell?
Yeah. I think the real issue comes from the larger consultancies, because in that scenario, the people who are your stakeholders are your team and your colleagues, right? So you're speaking in this echo chamber of language, which is actually not speaking to the end user. You might have a team of 100 people working on one client. Whereas instead, when you start your own business, and a lot of people are ex-corporate refugees that have come out of that space, not only do they have to wear 7 hats about running their business, but they need a new language. And if they've got at least clear on who they want to help, let's call it a niche, and are clear about the language of that market and what are the challenges of that market, suddenly they go, right, well, I've got 100 reference points. Maybe I've got 200 reference points, or maybe I've even got 10 if I don't need that many clients. But it's better than the echo chamber I was in a corporate space. Now, the skill is simply listening. Now, I think most consultants who've had experience, let's say more than 5 years, understand the skill in listening because they've had enough dramas when they didn't listen. But moving out of that echo chamber into a space where you're now listening to a market, that's key. And I think the opportunity, especially for consultants, if you take the idea that you could start any business, you could actually do anything to make a crust. There's a reason why you decided to be a consultant. And whether it be to support, guide, lead, it means you have an opportunity to do something most people don't, which is to actually start leading a market, actually become a leader in your space and help. And what does that mean, actually, Jackson? I'll digress for a second. What that means is a leader needs to point the way, right? Which means that you can see your space, your industry, whether you've got clients in it. Where does it need to go? What's the future for it? How can you contribute? So how can you actually have ownership and responsibility around it? How can you contribute to raise the tide for all boats? And it's only at that point when you take that position, rather than sitting back and just, pointing at things that are incorrect, but actually leading and start changing things, that people will start following you. And I think that is the great opportunity for consultants these days, to actually sit on the left-hand side of great people in an industry and actually guide them to success.
It makes so much sense, mate. And look, we work with service professionals of all shapes and sizes, coaches, consultants, advisors, agency owners, even trade businesses. And I think what's beautiful about what you do, Russell, is that all of these businesses, what they share in common is that they have a capacity to advise and consult for high ticket, because they solve big problems to make the big bucks. And the issue is a lot of fear of getting stuck in the commodity. And I'm sure you can speak from coming from the agency world. I think a lot of agencies promise the strategy and they get stuck kind of delivering the status quo. They get kind of stuck in the weeds, so to speak. And they are in some way, shape or form fearful to elevate into that higher position and create that market for themselves because of those problems that they're on the forefront to solve. So where do people start, mate, in your experience of making that transition from, say, the dark side into the big bad world of high ticket consulting and solving those big problems?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all above the line type stuff. It's when are you going to decide to actually take responsibility for what's happening, take ownership for the market that you've chosen, be accountable for the decisions you're helping people make. I think as soon as you actually take that on and own it, when you actually step out of the hiding from the results, blaming other people for their part in it, and actually take a leadership position, that makes all the difference to being seen as the consultant of choice or the real trusted advisor. Now, as an aside, you're a trusted advisor when someone starts asking for your advice outside of your area of expertise. And so, the day that the client asks you about maybe a wedding reception because their daughter's getting married, you know that you're the trusted advisor. But the marketing into sales piece when it comes to engagement is so key in that. There are consultants out there waiting for referrals, and referrals are lovely, but they don't necessarily grow the business. You need to be able to connect with people and have a conversation that invites them to take a step, right? To be in a position to help them do work. A lot of consultants are fearful of being seen as a salesperson. But once you understand that sales comes from the word salsa, which is to actually invite into the home, to actually take a step through a threshold, then you start understanding, no, sales is about helping people take steps through thresholds they may not have been through before. And that is what you're going to do when you've got the project assigned to you, when you've got the outcome, the responsibility for the outcome assigned to you, as much as before when you're actually helping that the prospect make a decision.
Makes so much sense, mate. And there's so much resistance there. And I guess that's also coupled with the fact that when you're a good consultant, you're highly sought after, and you're like, I never really want to do this marketing and sales stuff. I don't need to do it until there's crickets and like tumbleweeds and then no one's calling. And then you're like, oh shit, I need to do this sales and marketing thing. So how do these experts, these advisors, have their foray into good sales and marketing that keeps the phone ringing, keeps the inquiries coming, keeps the diary full, without feeling like they're selling out with all of this gimmicky BS that goes on?
Yeah, and there's two sides to that as well. Like, one is people go, I just get referrals and I build off the back of referrals. Often those people are not challenging themselves to help more people. They're playing in their safe zone. So let's say that there's one side that's a reason to grow. I want to play a bigger game. On the other side, maybe you have a roller coaster ride of sales and marketing. It's often because you've still got a bit of an employee mentality. You're in a project, you're out of a project, you're in a project, you're out of a project. Really, the best position to be in is auditioning clients. If you can have a position where you are auditioning clients, it means that you're always in a scenario where there are connections being made and conversations taking place, allowing you to decide, is this a person that I'm going to help? Is this a person I'm going to guide? It's the position of kingmaker, which is what the advisor is all about. Once you start having a pipeline of prospects that are having conversations with you, light conversations, and you're starting to audition them, there is a hell of a lot of confidence that comes from being in that space.
It's a pretty abundant position to be in. And look, I think for many advisors, that might seem a little bit out of reach, right? So what's involved to get to that point, mate? Can you talk us through maybe some of the steps?
Yeah. So a lot of people will see marketing as one activity and sales as another. The reality is they're one. They're one system. They're a pipeline. And so all it is connecting with people, qualifying that they could ever use what you've got, inviting them to take a step with you. And I think this is the key that a lot of people don't do. It's like, what are you going to invite them to? Have some relevant space to take them to. Have you got a community, a group, an event, an association, a resource that's relevant to them that you can invite them to? Inviting people into that space brings them into your world. And as I was saying before, through the threshold. You think of the hero's journey. You as the consultant, as the advisor, are the mentor. They've now met you. You're inviting them to take a step into your world. From that, you can have a conversation. And I like to take a couple of steps from them to see, is there a priority to do some work? And if there is a priority, then we will see if and how that might look. So we're not making an offer until we're really sure that this person has passed the auditioning process. So it's 6 little steps: connect, qualify, invite, chat, priority, and sale. And I think the key with any sale in the consulting space in particular is it should be collaborative. There was a guy I know from the sustainability space who teaches people how to get joint ventures and how to get investor income. And he said, you've got to always leave space for the partner to bring some of themselves into it so they can be a part owner or a co-owner in that relationship. And I think that's important in the design of the project you're going to do, in the work that you're going to do with them, that they actually have a say in how it's delivered. And when you do partner in that collaborative process, you get more engagement when you actually do win the job.
Makes so much sense, mate. Yeah, we can't kind of sell at the client. We need to kind of sell with the client. It's
Yeah.
as much their decision as it is our decision. It's like that idea of the 50-50 partnership, and I think that resonates so much, which is fantastic. So I guess the next part to this, mate, is it sounds like we've got a really robust auditioning and engagement process that allows us to work out the right people from the wrong people. Um, how do the best consultants that you work with fill their funnel and actually make sure that they have an abundance of opportunity to take through this process, Russell?
Yeah. The having that market leading position is the goal. And it's the gold at the same time. It means that you are networked and you continue to be networked. But back when I went out on my own down here in Victoria, Australia, there is a municipality called Monash, and it's one of the bigger business hubs in Australia. And I went to a networking function, and in that networking function, I met a few people who told me that there was a committee who ran that network. And I said, let me join the committee, and I joined the committee, and I actually served, I contributed. And the best thing I ever did was I said that I'll be on the greeting committee. I'll greet people at the door. And I greeted people at the door, and I got to know everybody in the community. And then suddenly they wanted me to be the president of that community. And so I became the president of that community. And those things continue to grow. When you're in that, my father once said to me, never become the president, always be the guy in the back that's actually that's steering behind the scenes. And I do not agree with that statement. I think that if you want to be a leader of peoples, if you want to actually be an advisor of substance, you need to take the responsibility and actually step to the front of the line and be the president, be the leader in the space, create the community if you need to. It gives you a great opportunity to invite people to things, and it means that you're continuing to build your circle of influence, which makes you very attractive to other circles of influence and other networks, and you will be invited into those when people see that you are a person of substance.
I think that resonates with me, mate. And look, I went on my own journey with this, Russell, as being someone who's a self-proclaimed introvert. I found a lot of those social settings very difficult. And it wasn't until I was able to heighten and raise the stakes of my purpose and what was at stake that I could lower the resistance for me to be present and show up. And sure, it depletes the battery for me still, but I can show up and I build those relationships and I can break the ice to a finite capacity. But I think it's so easy for people who maybe identify as being introverts, and I know that many advisors and experts do position themselves as such, to say, oh, I'm introverted. I can't do those things. I need to be behind the scenes. And if the outcome is important enough to you, you need to show up and get involved and put in that effort. Would you agree with that, mate?
Yeah, and I don't think it's about being introverted or extroverted. I'm definitely introverted. It takes energy for me to be around people. You know, there's the pandemic allowing me to be behind this screen is one of the best things for my own energy. But that doesn't stop me from understanding that there are certain values I hold true, one being contribution, one being, helping others. There are certain things that are the reason why you got into the business, which is kind of what you're talking about to a degree. There's certain reasons why you're there. Tap into those reasons and actually find the part to play, but play a part, right? But don't. There's no point in being the evil genius behind the scenes who's hiding in their lair, because no one wants to work with that person. They're wanting to work with someone that they can. That you don't have to. It's not about being transparent, but they want to be able to see you these days. They want to know who you are. They want to know who they're going to be working with, and that doesn't mean even you need to be on camera. That just means that you need to be there for people. And once you are there for people, people get a sense that you might be there for them.
Yes, makes sense. Great advice, mate. Really, really valuable insight. I think a lot of people will be able to take away. So, like, we're in the finance of the wealth space. We're big believers in using your business as a vehicle to create financial freedom. I can attest that the idea of consulting, advisory, and coaching are some of the best ways for you to fast track your cash flow and turn that into wealth. However, being an expert business, there is inherent key person risk, and that means that the business isn't necessarily valuable. from your frame of reference and with your experience, what would be your advice to consultants and advisors when it comes to creating financial freedom with their advisory business?
Yeah, it's funny actually. I was at a convention over the last 4 days, and a session I ran was actually how to build a saleable speaking business, which is almost as difficult as a consulting business. And there certainly are ways, but massive key on the way through, especially if you have no ambition of building a business but are happy to stay at a practice. That you need to be using some of that cash flow to build consistent wealth now. And actually investing consistently, not expecting some big payday at the other end. That being said, there are still opportunities for you to create asset classes as a consultant, and especially if you've got anything educational, you have a perspective that you can document. There are things that you can do with licensing and all sorts of other assets that are knowledge-based that give you more options at the very least. That being said, building wealth along the way is an absolute key.
Yes, I think really, even in this age with chatbots and AI and all of this stuff that's going on, Russell, I think the value of the future is curated information, because we have so much information that people are going to pay a pretty premium for that information to be distilled from a trusted source, a human source, that people can rely on in order to achieve particular outcomes. So I think what you're saying is that there's a tremendous opportunity, and I really implore anybody who is an information expert to get advice from someone like Russell on how you distill that and turn that into a product, so that can become an annuity that you can sell forever, and potentially even something that your heirs can inherit the income that generates. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah, and even on that point, a colleague of mine, had I think 3 bouts of cancer, and she was able to actually make it through financially on that end because other people were able to run her process, other people were able to run her intellectual property, and so making sure that you are doing something with that along the way while you're investing in your growing wealth, I think is key for those times when key person comes into play.
Beautiful, mate. Fantastic. So, Russell, we've covered a bit of ground here today, mate. With all of your wealth of experience and the work that you do with your clients, if you had to distill that into one last tip for our listeners and watchers of the podcast that they should take away and implement as a result of our conversation today, what would that one last golden tip be, mate?
I think it's the contribution piece. I think it is the collaboration piece, because at the end of the day, sure, we can do things faster alone. No doubt. But we can go so much further together.
Yes, lands so well, mate. It's powerful, simple words, but it's never going to go out of fashion. So I love it. So, Russell, if people have loved what you've said today, mate, and they would love to chat about potentially working with you, who is an ideal client for you?
Yeah, it's service providers that want to step into an advisory space. It's consultants who are really wanted to play a bigger game. It's probably not the consultant who's about to retire. There's so many cool things we can do for them, and that's part of that journey with IP. But I think the opportunity for those who want either better or more retainers, for instance, people can at least download. We've got a guide that we've created to help people get client retainers fast, and you can get that at russellpearsonprograms.com. That's a nice little resource. And if anyone's interested in looking at, how can I get more consistent projects, more consistent contracts and clients, that's the space that we'd be more than happy to speak to you about.
Beautiful, mate. Fantastic. Great. Well, we'll include those links in the show notes. It's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you, mate. You're always a wealth of knowledge, and with your speaking ability, you've got a great way of summarising it. So it always hits home, mate. So credit to you, my friend. So, guys, if you've enjoyed this podcast, make sure you drop us a like, drop us a follow, reach out to Russell if you'd love to chat about working with him in a higher capacity. And remember, guys, a good idea in theory remains exactly that, just a good idea until you put it into place. So make sure that you implement fiercely and enjoy the journey along the way. Russell, thanks again, mate, and look forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks so much.